This evening, I'm looking at the life of Isaac and Rebekah, an inside look into Rebekah and Isaac's marriage. Now, oftentimes when a newlywed couple who are in love, their thought pattern is basically this: as long as you genuinely love each other, everything will work out well. As long as you genuinely love each other, everything will work out well. And that is the mindset with which they get into marriage. Now, you must understand that love is not just an emotion. Love is an act of the will. So when the emotions run out, when the emotions collide, oftentimes individuals have a question in their minds. Was this person really the one whom God had for me? Did I make a mistake? And their marriage then begins to flounder and sometimes even crash. But this thought that as long as you genuinely love each other, everything will always work out, it is actually a myth. It is not really true. Because marriage, you must understand that it is hard work. Now, when you think of the life of Isaac and Rebekah, the marriage relationship between them, we will definitely have to say that this was a marriage that was made in heaven, isn't it? When you look at how the whole thing worked out, where Abraham sends his servant across, and then exactly what the servant prayed for happens. And then Rebekah meets Isaac for the first time, and Isaac takes her home, and she becomes his wife. It is like a typical romance story which will end with, and they lived happily ever after. But that is not how it really ended, isn't it? Even though their marriage got off to a wonderful start, as this couple reached maybe their golden wedding anniversary, things were not the same as it was earlier. So this evening, our whole understanding would be, let's look into their lives. Let's take an inside look. Look at what are the things that brought them together. What are the things that kept them together? And also, what are the things that brought a decline in their relationship, so that we would learn from their lives, that we would not make the same mistakes that they made, and also make sure that we do the right things that they did, so that our marriages can become very, very strong and successful. So let's get to the very beginning. And first of all, understand about Isaac's background. Remember, God promised Abraham the promised son, okay? The promised son. And it took a long time. It took a long time for Abraham to have this child. After the promise, 25 years, Abraham and Sarah waited. And then finally, the promised son comes along. I'm sure Isaac must have brought a lot of joy and happiness to their home. And Isaac also, when you really look at all the background understanding, we find that he would have also been a very obedient and a very submissive child. Why do we say he would have been a submissive child? Because remember, as a young lad, when God tells Abraham, I want you to sacrifice your only son, Isaac, and Isaac is willing to go along. Isaac is willing to lay at the altar. Isaac is willing to, be bound up, Now, that shows his deep-seated submission to what his father wanted, isn't it? It shows that Isaac was a well-obedient, submissive, quiet child, okay? Also, when you're thinking about the family of Abraham, Isaac, and Sarah, this was a very close-knit family, a very close-knit family. When you're thinking about this family, Sarah, after Sarah's death, 3 long years goes by before Isaac gets married. 37 years of age, his mother died. And for 3 years, if you notice, the scripture tells us when he finally meets up with Rebekah, and he was comforted after his mother's death. In other words, this was such a close bonded family that they felt the loss of Sarah for 3 whole years. So Isaac was the only child at home because Ishmael was sent away, and the parents' lives have revolved around him. Maybe Isaac and Sarah never really recognized the impact that the type of upbringing they were giving him was going to make for the future. Remember, Isaac gets married at the age of 40 years. Now, in that culture, that was not the done thing. In that culture, they got married much earlier. So for 40 years, Abraham did not even think about Isaac's wedding. Abraham does not even think about the fact that God has promised that through your seed, there's going to be a multitude that is going to come in. He didn't even think about that. Their lives were centered only around Isaac, only around Isaac. Okay. Now that can really make a lot of difference in a marriage setup. The type of upbringing that you had, if you're the only child, if you're the pampered child, if the lives of your parents revolved around you, then when you get married, you also expect that same thing to happen. And if it does not happen, you're in for trouble. So your background plays an important role. What about Rebecca's background, on the other hand? We find that in contrast to Isaac's quiet, obedient, submissive type of a temperament, you find that Rebecca was beautiful, vivacious, friendly, outgoing, unselfish, and very, very energetic. How do we know that again? In Genesis chapter 24, verses 15 to 20, when you find a servant sitting at the well, waiting for somebody to come, you find Rebecca comes along, and when the servant asks, please let me drink a little water from your jar, she said, drink, my lord, and she quickly gave him to drink. Stranger, but she was not reserved. She was outgoing. She was willing to make friends. And then when he finished drinking, she said, I will draw also water for your camels until they have finished drinking. Remember, not just one camel, camels. And how much water can camels carry in their back or inside of them? Plenty, isn't it? So here you find that Rebecca was willing to do that. She was outgoing. She was unselfish. She didn't think only about herself or this individual. She was also willing to think about his camels. And as a result, we find that these two temperaments were so totally opposite each other. They were so totally opposite each other. And when the servant finally meets up with her parents and her brother, and then they come to that conclusion, Genesis chapter 24 and verse 50, the verse that a lot of wedding cards would have, this thing proceeds from the Lord. They were convinced. Both of them were thoroughly convinced that this was of the Lord. This was of the Lord. Now, I would like to point out over here that this is an important thing, a foundational truth, if you want your marriage to be successful, to recognize that God has brought you together. And as a result, God does not expect you to separate in any manner whatsoever. It is God who has brought you together. Whether it was an arranged matter, whether you loved the other spouse before, you knew each other before, that is not the criteria. The criteria is the foundational truth of the understanding that this proceeds from God, that this is of the Lord, that you have followed biblical principles and made sure that the other person is also a believer in the same wavelength and all the other factors, the biblical factors for selection of your mate, and you are sure that this is of God. And that is the foundational truth. Because if you are not sure of that, as soon as a problem comes into your life, your immediate thought would be, did I make a mistake? Did I not respond correctly to God's will for my life. And that is where, once that doubt sets in, a lot of other problems and a lot of other questions would also come into your mind. So an important truth over there. Now, when the servant brings Rebecca to Isaac's home, long journey, obviously. And during that time, he would have definitely talked with Rebecca about, the character or the temperament of Isaac. He would have definitely shared with Rebecca that Isaac is an unassuming, mild-mannered, peace-loving man. How do we know that? He avoided at any cost any fights with the people who were fighting for the wells of Abraham. He said, okay, let them, if they want to have it, let them have it. That was his nature, that was his temperament. And he was also a very meditative individual, not a quick thinker, but very quiet and reserved. And that's where we find him when he is in the field. If the scripture tells us, he went out to the field one evening to meditate. That was his nature. So when you're thinking about both these individuals, they seem to be so very much poles apart. And they often say, isn't it, opposites attract. Now that's good. In a marriage situation, the opposites should be there, okay? If both are the same, like poles repel, opposite poles attract. So there has to be that attraction. But along with the attraction, there would also be times of friction. So if you're not aware of what is causing the friction, your marriage will end up in a mess, okay? So let's look at the starting of their relationship. The scripture gives us only this one verse. In Genesis 24 and verse 67, it says, then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Now that's the only information that we have about how they started out. But it seems to be that he expected her to replace the mother that he lost, because he brought her to Sarah's tent and he was comforted after his mother's death. Now remember, the wife is never a substitute for the mother. The wife is never to be one to be treat you the same way as your mother treated you. That is definitely a difference in the relationship. Important thought to note. Now, what happened in the next 20 years? It has started out well. Both of them have, in that sense of the term, in the Old Testament culture, they have got married, okay? But 20 years goes by without they having a child. They still stood strong. They still stood strong in the midst of that 20 years of barrenness. And that's an important thing. How? Why? How are they able to stay strong during all these times of barrenness? For them, obviously, here was a physical barrenness. But at times in our marriage, there could be other levels of barrenness. There could be maybe, there's a scarcity of money. There could be a scarcity of material goods. There could be a scarcity of, maybe emotional support. You may feel lonely. There are different types of barrenness that can come upon a marriage situation. But what will keep you strong together? First important truth over here is that love bears all things, even infertility. Okay, even infertility. Now, just because Rebecca was not able to conceive and have a child, that did not mean that Isaac should go find another woman to have a relationship, to have a child. And that's what his mother Sarah had suggested, and Abraham had responded to that. And he lay with Hagar, and Ishmael was the result, and then all the problems that came along. But the good thing that we learned from Isaac is Isaac was definitely a one-woman man. He said, no other person. Even if I don't have a child now, even if God does not give me a child, even though God has promised that through the seed, generations are going to come about, I'm going to trust in God. And I'm not going to budge an inch. I'm still going to continue to love and cherish. Okay. It's an act of the will. Whether you get something back or not, you're still going to continue to love. And that's an important thing. Rebecca couldn't have children for the first 20 years. And it may seem odd that a marriage arranged by God would be childless for so long. It seemed odd, isn't it? And there are times when there's barrenness, when there are problems, you may say, but God, you brought us together. We were so confident. We were so sure that it was of you. Why this problem? Why this barrenness? Why are all these conflicts happening? Or why are there so much of feelings of loneliness right now? Now, we must understand that in those moments, we don't look for options. You don't say, okay, if I don't get the support here, I'll go somewhere else. That's what Abraham did. But good points for Isaac. Important point to learn from us. Through the bad times, do not give up. Stick together. Love bears all things. Second important lesson over here is the power of a praying husband. The power of a praying husband. The Bible tells us that Isaac was 60 years of age when Esau and Jacob were born. 20 years he prayed. 20 years he prayed. Now, isn't that an important lesson from Isaac? When things are bad, when things are barren, when things have a lot of problems, when there seems to be things that you looked for is not there in the marriage, what do you do at that times? Pray, pray, pray together, pray together. The family that prays together stays together. And praying together as spouses, as parents, would unite your family together, unlike anything else. So this evening, let me ask you, are you and your spouse praying together? Praying, if you have kids, praying for your kids, praying for your marriage, praying for your family. Are you making that a priority in your life? Now remember, prayer is not changing things and situations, but prayer is actually changing us. What is God doing? Why was he not answering the prayer for 20 years? Now, you may have had a couple of years in your marriage and you may be saying, Lord, I've been praying, things are not changing. Why are they not changing? What would God really say? God was actually teaching Isaac that the fulfillment of the promised blessing could not be accomplished by human effort alone. They needed God's divine intervention. And that's the same thing that we must understand. When we go through those turmoils in marriage, when we pray together, we recognize that this cannot be handled on our own. God has to intervene. Or maybe you're praying for your child is rebellious, your child is not responding. When you begin to pray to God specifically together as a family, you're also recognizing that unless God intervenes, things are not going to change. So that is what took that 20 years of learning. So what are some of the lessons that we can learn from this 20 years of barrenness? Number one, your marriage always comes first. Your marriage always comes first. Remember, as I said to you earlier, Abraham looked for other areas of Hagar, and later on he also had other concubines. But Isaac was the only individual who did not have any concubines, who did not have anyone else. Okay, the important thing is your marriage comes first, even above your children. Whether you don't have children, no problem. If you have children, don't put your children above your relationship. Your marriage comes first. Okay. Isaac never strayed from Rebekah. She was his one and only. Number two, keep romance alive in spite of your struggle with infertility. Keep romance alive. Later on, you find in Genesis, another passage, you find that when he was in Gerar, Abimelech, the king over there, found, even though he made the same mistake as Abraham and said, she is my wife, she is my sister, Abimelech saw Isaac caressing Rebekah. Many years later, he is old now, but still he kept the marriage alive. He kept the marriage alive. Whether they had kids at this stage or whether it was after, we do not really know, but he kept the marriage alive, even as they grew older. Sometimes as you grow older, the romance can die. No, if you have to keep the marriage alive, keep your romance alive in spite of all struggles that you may have. And thirdly, the most important thing to keep ourselves strong in marriage is to pray and to pray hard and to pray hard. He prayed for 20 years, okay? And 20 years for him would have gone by just like a blink of an eye. When finally Isaac was born, when finally Esau and Jacob were born, rather, when finally they had twins, that would have definitely been a sense of relief and joy. We need to pray. Don't cease praying. Because situations have got tough, don't give up. Don't give up on God. Don't give up on your spouse. Pray hard, because that is the only key for a strong relationship. Okay. So now let's move further and find out what happened next. What happened next? How was there a decline in their relationship? What happened to their relationship? Now, oftentimes, when a person gets married, they have dreams about the future, about their life together. They have a vision about a life filled with shared interests, common goals and values, same cares and concerns. Sometimes it's like, shall we say, a romantic concept to say it's going to be love and good things all your life. Okay, but oftentimes again, you also have this phrase, the honeymoon period is over. Okay, a lot of people will say, okay, after you got married, there's a honeymoon. There's a honeymoon period, but now it is over now. Now it is reality. Okay, because no matter how ideally suited you are for each other, at some point of time, every husband and wife will recognize that they don't always agree on all points. They don't always think and feel and behave the same way. They would recognize that they are individual personalities. As a result, they have different preferences. And because of their backgrounds, there's going to be issues that will arise. And if you have had that, what shall we say, an emotional concept, a dream concept of what your life after marriage is going to be, a lot of people are shocked and devastated when the bubble finally bursts, when the bubble finally bursts. So it is not so common to hear of people saying, hey, this is not the same person I married. This is not the same person I married. Now, when you're thinking about Isaac and Rebekah, we find that yes, they did get married. Yes, they had definitely tender feelings for each other, even after many years, But the important thing is they did not spend time in that intimacy of communion of their soul and spirit. They did not honestly share what was going on inside of them, what they were thinking and feeling. There's no evidence in the scriptures that Isaac and Rebekah talked things over. They never seemed to come together. Maybe it all began with Isaac, who was a long-time bachelor. Maybe he was the outdoor type, not to be around the home. And Rebekah, on the other hand, seemed smarter, more responsible. And maybe she constantly told him also what he should be doing. And then as a result, because of this constant speaking, constant nagging, he would have said, hey, I don't want to be here. I'd rather go out, And then as a result, the estrangement would have come in. Or maybe once the sons were born, natural inclination, one to the other. And when that happened, that broke down even further their relationship one with the other. The children, even though they thought once we have children, then we'll all be able to come together. A lot of people have that thought, isn't it? Okay, we are having problems, we are having strain, but then once we have the child, once we have children coming in, things would be better. Not necessarily so. And oftentimes people stay together in spite of all the issues, primarily for the sake of the children. And the children are the ones who are also affected by that type of a relationship and a behavior. Now, we must recognize that when they had Esau and Jacob, okay, even though they may have thought things would be different now, things worsened. Why? Because Esau lived out his father's dream of being wild and free, and he became more like a hero than a son. And as a result, the attachment of Isaac and Esau was stronger. He was rarely disciplined by his father. But on the other hand, he was also constantly nagged upon by his mother. When Esau married Hittite wives, both the parents were upset. They were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah, the scripture tells us. But still, Isaac never said anything to him. Isaac never said anything to him. It's only later on when Esau realized how displeasing the Canaanite women were to his father Isaac, then he went and got married to more Canaanite individuals. In other words, the children did not cement that relationship. The children only sort of widened the problems that were already existing. So if we want our marriages to succeed, if we want to make sure that the children who are growing up in that environment are going to be growing up into healthy adults, the first important factor is between the husband and the wife, there has to be that vital, strong relationship. In order to do that, let's look at what were the reasons for their decline in their relationship. Reasons for decline. First of all, there was unfulfilled expectations. Unfulfilled expectations. One problem may have been their lack of children. Married for 20 years, this was not what either of them would have expected. This is not what either of them would have expected. But the scripture records nothing to indicate whether Rebekah communicated the disappointment of her barrenness with Isaac, nor does it indicate if Isaac offered understanding and support. But 20 years is an extremely long time, and it is safe to conclude that Rebekah suffered because of her childlessness, because of her childlessness. Now, it could be the unfulfilled expectations of having children. It could also be, on the other hand, for some people, the unfulfilled expectations of not having children. Some people, they have not talked things over. Some people do not want any children. Some people want only one child. Some people want plenty. And if it is not communicated with one another, you find they are unfulfilled expectations. Also, when you get into a relationship with these expectations at the back of your mind, if Isaac got into this relationship with Rebekah thinking, now she would be the replacement for his mother who had passed away 3 years ago. If that was the expectation that he had, he would definitely have been disappointed, because unfulfilled expectations may lead to feeling disappointed and resentful. As we replace hopes and dreams with sadness, tension, anger, or conflict, we can become trapped in the breeding ground of poor communication. Yes, there could be unfulfilled expectations because they are two different individuals. They have not spent time sharing. If they have not shared, if they have not communicated, and then they're feeling disappointed and resentful, and they're not sharing that disappointment, sharing that resentfulness with the other person, what will happen? It is going to break down the relationship even further. Ask yourself this evening, what are some of your preconceived expectations of marriage between your spouses, husband and wife, husband for the wife, wife for the husband? What are your preconceived expectations of your marriage? When you got married, what were your expectations? Did you share those expectations? Or are they only at the back of your mind? You expect your wife to do this, you expect your husband to do this, but you've never shared it. And as a result, they don't know what your expectations are. And when you don't fulfill it, they are disappointed. They feel resentful. How are you managing these unfulfilled expectations? You have not shared, they do not know, you're feeling disappointed, the other person is feeling disappointed. Now, how do you manage those unfulfilled expectations? Do you share it with your spouse or do you keep it to yourself? The main problem in the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah is there doesn't seem to be any passage of scripture which speaks about they sitting down and talking things over, sitting down and talking things over. That's where we come to the second reason for the decline, is the failure to communicate. Failure to communicate. It seems to have been a basic problem of communication. Rebekah and Isaac, two different temperaments, two different types. Rebekah, with a bubbling personality, would have loved to talk, but Isaac, with his retiring personality, would have preferred solitude and silence. They would have shared less and less with each other through the years, and Rebekah's bitterness would have grown because of that lack of communion and communication, which she definitely longed for. And maybe even though she may not have expressed anything, her tone could have changed. Her tone while addressing her husband or saying something could have taken on a very caustic tone. Or maybe her face could have developed lines of disgust and disdain. Or maybe even a scornful glance and spiteful comments could have drawn even Isaac further and further into his shell. And over a period of time, experts tell us that a person can actually become tone deaf. You shut off a person's voice, you shut off a person's voice, you don't hear them anymore. So one of the spouse may be saying something and the other person doesn't say anything at all, keeps quiet, and has shut off the ears totally. That is silence in that communication. Blocking of communications is definitely going to be cause for a decline. Now, when you're thinking about these two types of temperaments, one a quiet personality, one an outgoing, outspoken personality, Jewish scholars also say that Isaac had this type of a personality because of the trauma that he went through when he was placed on the altar, And this, they say, would have scarred him for life. And he would have never become comfortable in the physical, material world. All that he was thinking about is that God has asked him to be sacrificed to him. And that is what he must have always been working on, that he has set apart for God. And Rebekah, when she comes along and meets Isaac, all that she is recognizing is, hey, here's a quieter personality. Here's a spiritual individual. Here's a person who seems to be closer to God. So as a result, I better not say anything. I better not upset his feelings. I don't want to hurt him. And as a result, I won't say anything. And oftentimes these type of thoughts that a person has, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to hurt that person. So I'll keep it to myself. But the more you keep it to yourself, you'll find that it is going to build up inside of you till one fine day it bursts out as a volcano and the other person is shocked, and then at times that's a point of the marriage breaking down altogether. Now you also find that when Rebekah finally conceived after those 20 years, she had a very violent pregnancy. These two kids were kicking around in her womb. And then the scripture tells us she went to the Lord and asked for answers. Okay. Scripture does not say here that both of them sat together and prayed. The scripture tells us that Rebekah asked the Lord, and the Lord spoke to her and said, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people shall be separated from your body. So God gives her this information that you're going to have twins, okay? But she does not really share these details about one serving the other and all the rest of it, okay? There's not one hint in scripture that she ever shared with her husband this unusual prophecy concerning Jacob the younger. Why do you think it would have been so hard for her to talk to Isaac about anything? Maybe by this time they have become so distant. Maybe by this time, they have, already had issues going on. And maybe now during this pregnancy, it has aggravated because changes have happened in her own body, in her emotions, and it has been aggravated, the things that she was feeling. And rather than finding support in her husband, she finds that she has, come into her own shell. And as a result, the communication that should have been there is not there. Marriage counselors estimate that fully half of all the cases that come for counseling involve a silent husband. In some cases, it could be like Isaac, who had a genuine difficulty, to talk because of all the background, the baggage that he carried along. Maybe he did not think much deeply. He did not have much to say. But in other cases, a normally communicative man may neglect sharing things with his wife because he's so caught up at work. He's so caught up with other things. He gets so caught up with sports maybe. And he's so involved in his own world that he doesn't share anything with his wife. And if she begins to nag him about it, he may build a protective shroud of silence around him and withdraw even more. Important truth, important lesson for us to understand, especially as men. Silence is not golden. We must learn to communicate. Our wives want to listen. Our wives want them to talk, for us to listen. Our wives want us to share our feelings with them. And as they share their feelings with us, we must be willing to listen. So whatever situation you may be in whatever levels of communication you may be in, remember, as men folk, we need to work on our communication skills. We need to work on our communication skills. Now, even if you're not a great talker, you can definitely learn to become a good listener. A wife who finds the undivided listening attention of her husband will definitely be very grateful. But once the husband or the wife shares their feelings, shares their concerns, be careful. Do not judge the other person for their feelings. Do not judge the other person and put them into a frustrated aspect so that they clam up all together. Okay. Yes, there may be disagreements in what they're, what you feel about what the other person is saying, but do it kindly and respectfully, not sarcastically or condemning the other individual. Try to understand the other person instead of trying only to be understood. Don't jump to conclusions, but patiently hear them out. And definitely, by all means, never nag at the individual. Nagging is the world's number one communication killer. Now, we must remember that the goal for healthy communication is to complete the journey from facts to feelings. Okay. The first level of communication is facts. If a husband comes home and the wife will ask, "How was the day?" Oftentimes the husband will say, "Good." One word, that's it. But the wife wants to know more, not just the details about what happened, but the wife wants to know how you felt when those things happened. Now, you may say, yes, the husband is very tired by the time he comes back home. Let him relax. Don't jump on him as soon as he comes into the house. Let him relax and then, ask about what happened. And husbands, make sure that you're willing not just to give facts, but to share feelings. That is how it shows what level of communication skill you have. Sharing facts can take you only so far. But it is only when you are willing to share feelings. It is definitely more risky. It can lead to disagreement and judgment, but trust will grow as a couple as you are willing to hear opinions, discuss differences, and remain open to hearing the other person's view. So the most effective communication is to be able to share feelings and needs, to share feelings and needs. Sad to say, there doesn't seem to be anything like that between Isaac and Rebecca. Let me share with you some communication killers and check if you have used any of these with your spouse. The first one is overgeneralizations. Have you ever told your spouse, you never do this, you always do this? Those are all absolutes. Okay. Now you be careful that you don't overgeneralize, because that's not the truth, isn't it? That's not the truth. Maybe many times, but that's not always, So be careful about overgeneralizing. Never use derogatory names. Don't pull down that individual. Don't call them by some bad names. Don't do that. That is going to break down your communication and your relationship. Don't ridicule the other person. Don't use sarcastic phrases, Don't use sarcasm to put them off, And definitely never give a silent treatment. Never give a silent treatment. That is again going to not build up your relationship, but you break it down. Relationship specialist instructs couples to work towards a ratio of 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative. 1 negative, in order to counteract that, we have to use 5 positive statements or interactions. Otherwise, the negative is still going to be strong. Positive interactions include such relationship builders as a smile, a touch, changing the course of negative conversation, and positive, affectionate, encouraging comments. Ask yourself, even this evening, the ratio of communication killers to relationship builders in your marriage. How does your marriage mathematics add up? Is your ratio of communication killers more, or is it the relationship builders that are more? And what changes can you make in your marriage? Take time, note it down in your notes, maybe, to list the strengths and the weaknesses of your marriage in the area of communication, and make this a focus of prayer in the coming days. Third reason for decline is secrecy. The scripture tells us she prayed and asked God, God, what is this? Why is this happening in my womb? And God gave an answer. Now, this is the sad part of it, or the strange part of it. If you got an answer from God for a problem that you were facing, which also involved your husband, wouldn't you go and share with your husband to say, this is what I prayed about and God answered me? Why would she withhold this significant information from Isaac? Did she feel inferior to Isaac, unable to express herself freely? Did she not want to trouble Isaac with the knowledge that there would be a lifelong strife between their children? Or did she choose simply to deceive? Whatever it may be, her inability or unwillingness to communicate with her husband led to a series of tragedies to the family. Secrecy must be avoided at all costs. Your life must be an open book. Spouses, passwords for your phone, for your emails must be known to your spouse. Don't keep something secret. Where you're going, your appointments, don't keep it secret. Information must be shared. Fourth reason for decline is showing favoritism. The foundation of stability in a home is definitely the love and unity of the parents. That which should give a foundational stronghold for the children, for their growth into maturity, would be the love relationship that they see in their parents, the unity and the love that they see among them. But if, on the other hand, they see one parent taking one side, one parent taking another side, and there's a constant fight and disunity taking place, that is definitely going to affect them. So the fourth reason for decline is showing favoritism, showing favoritism. Isaac's way of dealing with the lack of unity was to take control and to ignore Rebekah. He did not tell Rebekah that he was going to give the final blessing. He did not consult her. He said, I'm in charge, I'm going to decide. He said, I'm the head of the household. And he decided to give Esau the blessing of a patriarch, while at the same time restoring the birthright that Esau had so foolishly given up. Okay, that is what he decided. That is how he responded. Okay, remember earlier we said, that each was drawn to the other. Isaac loved good hunting game, and as a result, he was drawn to Esau. Rebekah was a person at home, and Jacob was a person at home, and they spent time together. So the binding between Rebekah and Jacob was there. The binding between Isaac and Esau was there. And the strain in relationships between Isaac and Rebekah also brought strain in relationships between Esau and Jacob as well. And as often happens, when a husband and wife have a poor relationship with each other, Isaac and Rebekah each latched on to one of the children in a substitute relationship in order to fill the emptiness in their souls. That's what Genesis 25 and verse 28 tells us now. Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Rebekah loved Jacob. Psychologists today warn us of the same two problems that were present in this home. They tell us that a dominant mother and a passive father have a tendency to produce problem children, and that favoritism in the family unit tends to cause serious personality defects in the children. And that is exactly what happened in the home of Isaac and Rebekah, isn't it? Jacob showed his self-seeking grasping by stealing his brother's birthright. Esau showed his contempt for his parents, by marrying two Hittite women against his parents' wishes. And in the meantime, what did the peace-loving Isaac do, where he didn't want to get involved at all? He sat around eating his stew, letting it all happen. He didn't want to make any decisions, and that is what happened in Isaac and Rebekah's home. And that is what continues to happen in a lot of homes today. So we need to be careful that we don't allow favoritism for children to come in the way of the relationship with the husband and wife. The fifth cause for decline is deception. The story of Rebekah instructing her son Jacob to impersonate his brother Esau is definitely very, very shocking, isn't it? Very shocking. Rebekah, remember, does not even try to enter into a reasoned argument with Isaac in order to make him understand, hey, look here, this is what God said, but this is what you're trying to do. God said the younger one is going to get the blessing. You're saying, no, the older one is going to get the blessing. She didn't even try to think things through or to speak to Isaac at all, okay? She says, I'd rather, instead of asking God what I should be doing, I will do my own thing. I will use deception. And remember, that was her background. Remember, her father Bethuel and her brother Laban, okay? Laban tricked Jacob, isn't it? Trickster, deceiver. That was her background. And now, with what has happened over the years, all that was there in the background, the baggage that they have carried, now begin to somehow come out into the surface because they have not really been focusing on God. And that is why in the beginning, when we started off, they started off well. They prayed hard during those barren years, good thing, right foundation. But as children came along, maybe there are times of praying together. Maybe there are times of communicating together. Maybe there are times that they could spend together was not there. And each found their bankruptcy fulfilled in one child and latched onto that. And as a result, they thought that that would survive, but it didn't really survive. Rebekah here feels that she could never speak to her husband as an equal, Maybe that was the culture at that time. Or maybe he never listened to her. Or maybe he never responded, to her opinions at all. Maybe he never consulted. So he said, why should I consult? Okay. And as a result, we find that this strain became even further and further. Now, just a thought in passing. In Genesis chapter 22 and verse 19, when they come down from the mountain after Abraham has sacrificed the ram that God provided, Genesis 22:19 tells us that Abraham returned. The Bible does not say that Abraham and Isaac returned. The Bible does not say Abraham and Isaac returned. This is where Jewish scholars will say that situation actually traumatized him. It left him, if we were to say, still on the altar. And he thought that was really the important thing. The spiritual was more important than the physical. And at times, an individual today can get into that type of a setup. Ministry is more important than marriage, The spiritual is more important than marriage. I'm not able to spend time with my family because I'm spending time with God. Now, all those are excuses because you don't want to spend time with your family. Yes, our priority has to be God, but if God has put the husband and wife together, it is for a purpose so that we spend time together with God to build up the relationship. So silence, if you were to say, is the greatest danger in breaking down the relationship. That was number five in the decline, deception. Now, Rebecca, at this particular point, when she knew that Isaac was going to do the blessing, this would have been the perfect time for Rebecca to flee to God in prayer for divine wisdom, and then go and share with Isaac the promise that God had made to her shortly before the twins were born. If there was ever a time to talk it over, this was it. Had she reasoned with him lovingly on the basis of God's word to her, she certainly could have secured for Jacob the blessing God wanted him to have. But instead of prayer and reason, she chose deceit. And this is the greatest danger. When we think that we can do the role of God, instead of coming to God, we think, I can handle it. This is how we have handled it in the past. This is how my parents handle it. My brother handled it. This is how I can do it also. Instead of coming to God and finding the solution to the problem that you are facing, if you are going to use deceit and cover up and think you will get away with it, that is going to lead to greater troubles. Concealing one's true thoughts and feelings can actually be a form of deception, and deception had become a way of life for Isaac and Rebekah. Ask yourself, between the spouses, even this evening, is that deception or is that life an open book? Number 6 is manipulation. She decided to deceive so that Jacob will get the blessing. Now she goes one step further. Now does the manipulation. She has learned now how to handle Isaac. She knows how to handle Isaac. Isaac is concerned only about his stomach. Isaac wants a good stew. Isaac wants a good meal. Isaac wants a good hunting game. And she knows how to do the best cooking for him. And she manipulates him. It was easy to manipulate Isaac now. He was an old man, and she was an expert in deception. And as a result, now she decides to manipulate him. No question of discussion. No question of speaking together and coming to a conclusion. Now, this is the danger. Look at all the steps that have gone by, where you have now reached the stage that you think you can do it. You think you can handle your spouse. You think you can manipulate your spouse to get what you want. All these years, you do not get it, and you kept quiet, and you played your game. And now you know how to handle it and give it back to him. Husbands and wives who purposely keep things from each other who sneak around to hide the truth about finances, the activities they are involved in, the things the children have done, or anything else, can never enjoy the fullness of God's love in their relationship. Love can only grow in an atmosphere of honesty, in an atmosphere of honesty. Now, in order to get Isaac to agree to her plan, that look here, if Esau and Jacob are going to be together, Esau, having lost his birthright and his blessing, is now going to be out to kill Jacob. What does she do now? She plays another game over there. And she has, maybe she wept over there, and maybe she created a great scene over there. There was a lot of drama over there. When in Genesis 27 and verse 46, she says, I'm tired of living because of the daughters of Heth. Now, is she really tired of living? She has been scheming, manipulating, enjoying her life. She says, if Jacob takes a wife from the daughters of Heth like these, from the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me? Okay. She creates a scene. She creates a big drama. Why? Because she doesn't want Jacob to lose his life. And as a result, now she manipulates and deceives him even further. And by her manipulation, Rebekah further alienated her husband from her. She enraged and totally estranged her firstborn son. And while she thought that her beloved Jacob would be gone for a few days, she never saw him again. That's the ending, the tragic ending of Rebekah. She thought it will be only for a few days, he'll go and come back. But she never saw him again. If only they had learned how to communicate. If only they had learned how to share together, things would have been very, very different. Now, some of the details may vary, but the general pattern of their lives has been repeated in many homes since then. Maybe it is being reenacted in your home right now. Communication may be at a standstill. You live under the same roof, but you live in your own world now, alone. It does not matter who is at fault, whether it's the husband or the wife. Stop drifting apart. Turn around and say, I need you. I need you to talk to me. I need to know what you think and how you feel. Please share yourself with me. I need you to listen to me and to try to understand. Then start talking about it openly and honestly. Reach deep down inside of you and share with each other your hurts, your fears, your struggles, your frustrations, your weaknesses, your confusion, your needs, as well as your goals and aspirations. Then listen to one another patiently, understandingly, and forgivingly, and then encourage each other lovingly. And if you do that, new joys will open to you as you grow together. Let me close with some application questions this evening to check up in your own marriage situations. Number one, is there any indication of the same kind of mother love in your relationship with your children that caused such unhappy consequences of Isaac's marriage? If you have children, and if you have been pampering them, how is it affecting your relationship? What can you do about it? Number two, in what ways can you teach your children the importance of marrying a believer and of seeking God's will in their choice? At a young age itself, if they see Christ-like living in your life, husband and wife, that would also set the foundation of the importance of a godly individual when they think about marrying. Number three, why do you think Rebekah never told Isaac about God's promise concerning their sons? Think for a moment. Why did she hide it from Isaac, her husband? Number four, why do husbands and wives in our day sometimes keep things from each other? Why do they keep things from each other? Why do they maybe not share their passwords, their emails, their phones maybe? Some individuals are very protective about their mobile. They don't want their spouse to open up anything. Why do they keep things from each other? And what can be done to remedy the situation? Number five, do you feel you can openly share your innermost thoughts with your mate? If not, why not? And share those reasons. Spend time talking with your spouse and sharing reasons why. Why not? Number 6, is what your mate shares with you of great importance to you? When your spouse is talking, sharing, do you listen? Do you really listen? Or do you just nod your head? And if your spouse asks you a question about what you have said, you don't know because you are listening with your ears open, but your mind was somewhere else. How can you correct any shortcoming in this area? Number 7, what specific things can you do to encourage more open communication and more intimate communion with each other? If you find that communication is a problem, what are some practical steps that you can do to resolve this issue? Number 8, are you sensitive to your mate's needs, or do your thoughts generally dwell on how you can best be served? Are you thinking only about yourself, what the other person has to do for you, or rather, are you thinking about what you can do for your spouse? How can you avoid a selfish desire to have your own needs met and dwell instead on the needs of your mate? And finally, number 9, how do people sometimes use their relationship with their children as a substitute for a good relationship with their mates? And what are the underlying reasons for this, and how can it be corrected? What are the underlying reasons for using the relationship with children as a substitute? So I'm in good relationships with my children love me, I love them, but their spouse, it is another story. How can this be corrected? Let's bow our heads in prayer together. Father, as your word has come to us this evening, granting us insights into the life of Isaac and Rebekah and their marriage, we thank you, Lord, that your word is clear and practical, that your word does not hide anything, and neither do you want us to hide anything from you or from one another. And as you have shown us, Lord, how their relationship, even though it was strong, declined over the years, and the reasons for the decline, we pray, Lord, that you'd help us even this evening to examine our own lives, to check upon our own relationships, our marriages, and to make sure, Lord, that we make necessary changes, that in the coming days, our marriages will become stronger, more united, more secure, and bring more glory and honor to your name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Okay, here's one, Anna. How to handle misunderstandings between the couple? How can misunderstandings be handled?
See, in order to handle misunderstanding, first of all, you should know that you have been misunderstood. Okay. Sometimes that itself, you may not know. You have said something and the other, you have meant it in one way, but the other person has taken it in another way. Now you would know that there has been a misunderstanding when there is a barrier that has come in between your relationship. Maybe things are all good, and now suddenly the other person is a little more quieter or non-responsive. Then you sense, if you have a good relationship, then these things will be spotted more easily. If you don't have a good relationship, then things can go on for a long period of time. Okay, so as soon as you sense there is a breakdown, there's a barrier that is coming, the first thing that you need to do is to make sure, and don't pile it up, make sure at the end of the day itself, hey, look here, I sense that there is some barrier. Did I say something today? And maybe there may be a gap. Maybe the person may think, oh, you don't even know what you have said. Spend time, be patient. If you have not understood, your misunderstanding, you need to be corrected. So be open for that correction, and spend time finding out, whether you have made statements which has been misunderstood. Clarify those. So that is the first stage. Since there is a breakdown, be willing to ask the cause of the breakdown, and then begin to work on clarifying the misunderstanding that person has. Oftentimes when the person brings it up itself, and then you may say, look, I didn't mean it that way, and I meant it this way. That itself would be an eye-opener and would be a closure to the topic. But if you have not brought it out, if you have not sat down together, and then it piles up. If it has not been dealt with the same day, the next day it becomes a pile up, something more that you have said, because there's already a breakdown in your communication. Anything that you say can be taken against you. So that type of a feeling comes in and more gets piled up. So that is why, as the scripture says, do not allow the sun to go down on your anger. Okay. Now, it's a good principle before the end of the day to make sure that when you are praying together, any distancing that you sense is sorted out at that point itself. Does that help, whoever is asked?
I guess it does. There's one more, Anna, here. Brother, if you have this, you have a follow-up, please do get back. Anna will to answer. But here's one more, Anna. What were some of the practical and creative ways you took time out for your work to spend quality one-on-one time with people?
How to have that time?
Yeah. How did you do it? How did you take some time out in a practical, creative way to spend time with your wife and to have that one-on-one time with you?
For us, especially in the early years, she used to go to work in the morning, come back, and then I used to go for ministry and then come back. And then when we got back, even though it was late in the night, we made sure that we spent time together before we went to sleep. Okay, so that was the timing at that time. Okay, then when kids come into place, then you need to find out which is the best time. Obviously, it has to be the time when they are sleeping. Okay, and then you need to make time. Initially, you can say, okay, only two of you are there, so you can identify a time. Then, as your responsibilities maybe grow, or as children take up time on your hands, you need to identify times that are most convenient, most suitable for you. Now, for us, the night was the best time because we were used to sleep late. Now, you may not be a late sleeper. You may be early riser maybe, and that time could be the best time. So whatever time, you need to decide as a couple which is the best time, but to make sure that you do spend that time. Okay? You do spend that time at the end of the day to find out how things went during the day. How was your day? Just to inquire that and to get not only that information, but if something happened that made you upset, definitely to clarify it. And definitely with today's technology today, both husband and wife are working and they're outside the home. You can definitely keep in touch, sharing the information, sharing maybe prayer needs of issues that are happening. So you're sharing your feelings. Look here, I have to meet with my boss and this is what has happened. So you don't wait for that to finish and then talk. Before it happens, you can text, you can call, and you're keeping your communication lines open even during that time.
Thanks, Anna. Anyone else, guys? Okay. Anna, how to rebuild the relationship in a better manner how to rebuild the relationship in a better manner when the initial years of marriage have caused conflicts and hurt, either due to extended families or because of unmet expectations. I'll just repeat the question. How to rebuild the relationship in a better manner when the initial years of marriage have caused conflicts and hurt, either due to extended families or because of unmet expectations.
Two areas over there. If they are speaking about extended family, my question would be, have you separated from that extended family now? So you are asking for starting over life anew. Okay. If that is the case, fine. You have now decided, hey, that was not really the right thing to hang around with either of your parents. You had to separate and set up your own home so that you can build your own relationships. You made a mistake in that. Now you realized it. It's important for you to live separately. and now you want to start life again. Start off from that. Let it be a fresh start. There is never a time in which you cannot make a fresh start. The scripture always speaks about a brand new beginning, a brand new start. So that whatever may have happened in your marriage relationship, there is always an opportunity for a fresh new start. Okay, so that is if it has been from the extended family situation. If it has been from the initial 5 years of conflict, okay, and now you have learned the lesson. Okay, remember, the reason for God not answering the prayer of Isaac for 20 years was to teach Isaac some lessons. Okay, you cannot do it, you need to depend on me. Now, whether he learned that lesson or not, we do not really know, but that was the reason that God was using those conflicts for a reason, for a purpose. Now, that is also an important lesson that we must learn. We must not say, let it my life be without any conflicts. We must rather be open for those conflicts to learn from those from that situation, lessons to better our relationships. Now, if you have gone through conflicts and not learned any lessons, spend time looking back and see what those conflicts have actually taught you. Maybe those conflicts have helped you to understand the importance of the husband and wife, the roles of the husband and wife. Or maybe the conflicts have taught you to depend more on God in your marriage than on your own self or your parents. Spend time looking back on learning the principles or lessons that you have learned from your conflict. And now that you recognize, hey, look here, we made those mistakes. Remember, the early years are always learning experiences. We make mistakes in the early years. As they often say, the first child grows up, your parenting skills, a lot of mistakes you may make, but the second one grows up automatically. So the first years of your own marriage relationship, there could be struggles. You understood. Now you cannot say, okay, now I've learned, now I get married to somebody else. No, that's not the option. You have learned those lessons. You have recognized you made mistakes. So now you're saying, I'm going to start afresh. I want my marriage to be on the right foundation. Maybe I learned my foundations were wrong. I depended on myself. I depended on love. I depended on whatever. Now I recognize it has to be on God. So you start afresh. Okay, start afresh. So at any given point of time, once you have realized your mistake, it is definitely a good thing to come together and say, let us start afresh. Let us start afresh. Maybe you can also, have a time that you can, refresh your vows to one another. Normally in marriage enrichment seminars, at the end, we also have a time in which, the spouses commit themselves or recommit themselves to one another. They make those commitments afresh to one another. They say it's going to be a fresh start. So you don't have to go for a seminar for that. You can together as a couple pray together and say, Lord, from this day forth, this is what we are deciding. So there's nothing that has happened in the past which is a waste. You always learn from them and then press on towards the future.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you.
You got one more, Anna. How did you and Akka, your wife, how did you go about devotions, prayer, and Bible study together? Was that during the family devotion time? That's the question.
We had our personal time and we had a family devotion time. Both of us there. Each one of us had personal devotion time, and as a family together, we also had devotions together. And we made sure that before we went to sleep, we also prayed together. As a family, we prayed together, okay? And our kids also made sure that, wherever they are, that they did not go to sleep before we called them up and prayed with them, okay? So that was the time in which both of us individually had our own devotions. There was also time as a family we met together and prayed together. And before going to sleep, both me and my wife, we prayed together and then went to sleep.
So when you say family devotions, you're talking about having family time with your children, where you study the word, pray, and sing a song or whatever.
Right.
Or so you did that even when the children were very young?
Yeah.
So then you would have had to keep your family prayer time really short. keeping the children in mind.
Yeah. When we say we pray together, it's not we are doing a study together as a family. We may read a passage of scripture and pray together, or we may read a devotion and pray together. That is the family devotions I'm talking about.
So if both of you
if you
are
are
studying,
not a Bible study.
so like you had your personal devotions, you would not have family devotions together.
Not a Bible study together, but we will definitely read a passage of scripture or read a devotional passage together. But when the kids were smaller, it would be a different format because it was more like, teaching them some, biblical principles. So it would be maybe, reading and helping them to read from their own Bible, their children's Bible, sharing with them the stories in the Bible and helping them to learn those from that. So when the kids were very small, once they grew up, of course, then it was a different one. So there are different patterns that you can use. It's no hard and fast rule that you have to follow one particular pattern. But the important aspect is to show to your children, to show to yourself the importance of a dependency on God. That is the key thing in the prayer time. The key takeaway point in the prayer time is to show our dependency on God, that we cannot handle it on our own. That at the end of the day, we come to you, Lord, and thank you for being with us. And we commit the night into your hands, and we commit the situations we are going through into your hands, acknowledging that you alone can help us. That is the key point in the prayer time.